Well, happy Labor Day weekend. Good to see you all. Chris kind of warmed us up a little bit with hands. Let's try some more interaction. Who has tomorrow off? Raise your hand. Nice. Who's working tomorrow? Extra blessings on y'all. I'm sure it's because you're either helping solve somebody's problem that is urgent, or they have created a problem and now they need you. So very grateful for you who are working. We have a history for the last many years. On this particular Sunday of Labor Day weekend, we talk about faith and work, kind of that intersection of our faith and our work, because that's where we spend the vast majority of our week. Most of us do at work. And so what does it look like to live into our faith in that space? This season, just again, another show of hands, who would say that your experience of work or your experience of your workplace has been a little bit of a clown show the last couple years? Yeah. Those of you who aren't raising your hands are probably the boss, and so you just don't want to admit that it's been really challenging. But Colossians 3:23 and 24 say, whatever you do, work at it with all your heart as working for the Lord, not for men, since you know that you will receive an inheritance from the Lord as a reward. It is the Lord Christ you are serving. It has been a weird season, and so it felt fitting that we would invite some people from our congregation to talk about what this has been like, what it's been like for them as they have lived into this season and what God is calling them to. So we did some interviews, which I will invite you to watch on the screen here.
All right, my name is Dune. My pronouns are he, him. I've been attending Bethany with my wife, Petra, whom a lot of you will know, for 10 plus years. And I've been in leadership positions with big and small tech companies for the last 20 plus years.
Yeah. My name is Andrew. I've been here at Bethany since 2012. My wife joined us after we got married in 2016. I worked as a software engineer in tech for about 10 years, but right at the start of COVID, I started transitioning and now run a rock climbing gym.
And my name's Amanda, and I have 2 grown daughters, and I live with my husband in Magnolia, and I've been a pharmacist at one of the area medical centers since 1990.
Wow.
Well, the last year and a half have been challenging, to say the least. They've kind of sucked. There's been a lot of crisis, personal crisis with deaths in the family, with other challenges at home. And through a lot of that, work in some ways was kind of a constant until it wasn't. And then there was crisis there as well. And that led to other types of change and transition. Most recently being my employment with my last company kind of coming to an end for a lot of different reasons. Change in leadership and reorgs and things a lot of folks might be familiar with. Just change in leadership mostly, leading to making work very challenging for me. So that, on top of everything else that was going on in my life personally, was hard, very hard, and began to have an impact on my sense of well-being, physical health, mental health. I got a blood pressure monitor to check my blood pressure. I've got my Apple Watch telling me that I'm not standing enough. So it led to needing to take stock and inventory of just where I was at with things and how much longer things could proceed as they were. So transition was definitely on the horizon.
Right. It seems like a lot of those transitions you mentioned, though, were not in your control. Like someone passing away, whatever's happening at home and work.
Right.
What was that like?
Throughout a lot of the turmoil and change and crisis, trying to find things that felt like I could control was challenging. But being able to find some of those things was also kind of life-giving and grounding.
Mm-hmm.
Dumb things like I have a dog. I call her my emotional support coach. I make sure to walk her 2-3 times a day. That's a constant. I can make that happen. All right. I have 3:00 matcha with my wife. I can make that happen. So there's things that I can do, that I can have control, that help when everything else is kind of swirling around you. Right. And I think about something an old college pastor had told me years ago. When you look at Psalm 119, thy word is a lamp unto my feet, right? It's not a spotlight or a floodlight to every place that I need to go, right? It's very much about where you are, right? So it's very much at your feet. And I have always kind of taken that as an encouragement to try to be present in the moment, right? So mindfulness practices, meditation, prayer, silent walks with my emotional support dog coach have been things that I've been able to lean into when everything else was kind of going up in flames.
Are things still on fire? Or have some of those been put out? Or
the fire is maybe 40% contained. There's still fire in other areas. Some mostly outside of work, but some of the work-related ones, I'm now transitioning into a new role. That's now stabilized, and I start a new role in a couple of weeks.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's
So
awesome.
that part at least is more stable.
Yeah. Andrew, do you want to tell us a little bit about your last couple years?
Yeah. So I worked as a software engineer for about 10 years. But even before that, when I was still in college, I had always wanted to open a rock climbing gym. And that had been a dream for forever. And it didn't happen for so many different reasons. Some of them financial, some of them personal life plan, how things were going. You graduate from college, and the first thing that you do is normally try to find some stability or some sense of belonging in the workforce in this world that we live in right now. So that momentum carried me for a long time as a software engineer. And then through that whole path, it always felt like I was doing okay, but it never really felt like I was flourishing. It always felt like I could do enough to earn a living and I could survive and achieve some sort of status within this world that never really felt like it mattered that much, and never really felt like I could deep dive into those relationships with people or into a sport of passion like rock climbing is. So right around the end of 2019 is when I started to finally make the decision that I was going to really put an emphasis on talking to banks and lenders and real estate agents and general contracting companies and all that kind of stuff. And the ink was barely dry on the lease when I had finally found a building, when the pandemic happened and the whole world shut down and things got really, really crazy and the world flipped upside down a couple of times. And at the time I was still working my job as an engineer, because the goal was to roll through that transition where I could quit my job as late as possible for the gym to be open,
Right.
for that to be my full-time role. But then all of a sudden in March 2020, I got laid off from my job. I got an email that I was going to get laid off. And my very first thought was, what am I going to do? And almost within the same breath, my next feeling was this intense sense of weight being lifted off my shoulders. Like, all of a sudden, God was telling me, you don't need to worry anymore. And I just didn't. It was amazing. I don't really understand why, but I tell my wife, Caroline, and we often reminisce about this, how summer of 2020 was actually one of the best times that we'd ever had together. We just didn't have anything to worry about. She was furloughed. She ended up keeping her job, but we went on walks. We hung out with the cat. We cooked and baked a lot and worked on the gym at the same time. Everything was in a little bit of a state of flux of, when are we going to get to start construction? When are we not going to? How much financial runway do we have to make this happen? How much financial runway do we have to make the business happen? And there are still many things that feel on fire. This time they're all fires of my own making instead of from the employer that I was working for before. But for the first time in my life, I feel like my work and my faith have intersected so intensely and so deeply now. in a way that I can be fruitful for what God has called me to do rather than just surviving.
Right.
Yeah.
What does that look like in the sense of, like you said, this is my dream? Like, it was before you met Caroline, like you really wanted to do this. And now you're saying that your faith and work life feels like it's intersecting. What do you make of that? Like, how did your dream get to this, like, glorious Lord?
Yeah, it's really fascinating. It's one of those things where I think that more and more I've realized that the reason this dream has worked in some ways and not other ways fully, but is through me leaning into what I feel God has been calling me to do, because I'm very passionate about rock climbing and I'm very blessed to have been able to incorporate those. I know that that's not true for everyone, but ultimately what has really been the most fruitful is diving into those relationships with my customers and my staff, where I'm literally responsible for the health and wellness of my customers and my staff now, and working in the health and fitness industry now. And having that responsibility and that trust that others have placed in me feels very precious. It feels like this living, breathing thing that I'm trying to nurture all the time, instead of just coming in and punching a clock or looking at my checkbook and say, oh yeah, I made this number of dollars and I made that number of dollars. Obviously, we want to be a growing, thriving business, but the primary goals on top of it are not financial. The primary goals on top of it are having fulfilling workplaces for my staff and fulfilling lives and climbing careers for my customers as well.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's great.
I, like I said, started pharmacy in 1990 and have worked straight through. When the girls were little, I just worked a day a week just to keep my foot in the door, but to be with them as much as I could. And then as they got older, would add a little bit. I even, when my youngest was in kindergarten, our other church asked me to be their interim children's director, just totally off, because I'd always worked with the kids and in the programs. And I was like, what? I'm a pharmacist. That's weird. Of course not. But then, prayed about it and thought, maybe that is what I should be doing. So did that in addition to pharmacy, and the interim job ended up being 3 years.
Whoa.
So, but it was really fun and it felt good. It felt like what I should be doing, and for the time, and then went back to just pharmacy, and I've done that. I've enjoyed it. I love the patients. There's different roles you could work as a pharmacist, but what I really liked the best was with the patients, And so that's what I've done the last 15 years or so. It is a physical job, so we didn't really even have chairs because you're just kind of running around all day, and it's pretty stressful. And there's just a lot going on, regular stuff, and then phone calls with a million questions and insurance problems, and just it's a high stress job, It's like and but I've always liked it. I've always just worked my hardest. I think I said it's been important to me. So in my life, it was kind of God, and then my family, and then work. And so I just tried to do the best I could always. In the last few years, I have had a couple injuries, and right after COVID started also, and right before COVID started. And, the first one required kind of a major surgery to repair, and felt like it took forever to recover. And then when it was just about recovered and I was really super active again, and then boom, I had an accident, and then I had to have another a different injury that had to get repaired and stuff that took forever. But in that is just that there was a lot of pain, and but I kept working because it's important to me. And but it was painful, and just working all day with the pain, kind of get home and be like, just kind of zoned out. Or the day off, I'd be almost like recovering from work, which sounds lame, but, well, kind of is lame. But it just got harder and harder. And then with COVID also, they had to cut back staffing, but we still had to work
Right.
So we just didn't have as much support staff. So it was a little harder. And, we have to go rain or shine or snow or anything. There's just always, you got to be there. And one of my visits to my daughter on the East Coast, one day in the spring, she said, well, you should just think about retiring and work enough part-time to pay your insurance or something. And I thought, that's a crazy idea. I've always planned to work till I was like 70 and I'm only 59. And but that she sort of planted a seed, and once in a while that would come to my head again, and just as a I don't know, that doesn't make any sense. And what happened was, I know my husband would see it on me, probably, how wearing it could be. We were at church at the end of May, and someone got up and talked about the Agros trip that was coming up. And my daughter had gone with Agros twice when she was in high school. And my whole life I've wanted to do a short-term or even a long-term mission. And I just thought, man, that'd be great. And like, maybe I could do it, why not? I could do that. I could go on one of those trips, I should go for it. And I just really felt moved, like I should be doing this. Like, is God telling me I should be doing this? But just in the service, I really felt moved while she was talking. And so afterwards, we went out to the lobby and to find out about this trip. And we said, well, when is it? And they said, July 30th. And we're like, this July? And that's like 2 months away. And then I thought, oh, well, that's not possible because we have to put in vacation like 9 months ahead. So, that's going to be impossible. And then I went to a meeting for it like that night or a week later or something. And I still just felt really moved and about this trip. And so I just retired. I went to Nicaragua. Right. And it was amazing. And the crazy thing is, once we decided, I felt really at peace about it. And like I said, I would always plan to work, forever. I couldn't picture not working. And in everything I was doing after that decision, I just felt so relaxed. It was really giving me goosebumps. It's the weirdest thing. Just doing the normal things I was always doing. I didn't feel that crazy. Gotta go. I just felt really at peace about it. I didn't feel worried about it. It just feels like God will provide. He always has. Right. So if you have any more questions about that.
Well, I mean, when I think of somebody who describes themselves as like in pain all day at work, like week in, week out, and then retiring, I think this lady's still working somehow because you don't love work that much and then just sit on the couch. Yeah. And so I'm wondering we get paid for some of our work and some of our work we don't get paid for. Yeah. So I'm wondering, what does work look like for you now, even if it's not paid pharmacist?
Well, we do Strong Families. It was called Safe Families. Now it's called Strong Families. And we host. We started hosting. We've done Strong Families a couple years, and we started hosting in about January or February. But it was always kind of Murphy's Law. Even though I worked part-time, when the needs would come up, it was always just off from my work schedule where, can't do that one. And it was kind of frustrating. And now we can just do it. If something comes up and we're here, we can take it. We've had 3 since we got home from Nicaragua a couple weeks ago. Oh, wow. And it's just great. And busy with the kids. We've got 20 or more kids on our block, block. And so there were 3 over today. We were making brownies and getting covered with chocolate.
Well, that's clear that you are doing that.
Answer or not, but and then I'll probably look into doing something else.
Something else with kids or something else with pharmacy, probably, or just like roll the dice?
I think with kids. I think pharmacy's just done. And I know my coworkers were really shocked, and but there had been reorgs and there's always reorgs. It's always will be.
Always
change. And that's fine. But things were getting harder, with staffing cutting back and stuff like that. And I knew things weren't going to get easier.
Right.
And it just felt really freeing to just say, no, just done. And the coworkers were pretty shocked.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt a little bad because we were like a family. And I still get lots of messages from them. And it was just a big change.
I'm curious, like, we're Christians who identify as Christians, like in many ways. What is that like? I know you're in leadership at work and you're not walking around giving people tracts, or I guess you don't really walk around because everyone's remote, but you're not emailing them tracts. Like, what does it look like in your lens to like show Christ at work? You both are like culture makers, and you were too in your leadership role. Like, what does it look like these days?
Well, I think a lot of it has to do with how you treat people, right? How you treat people, and there's plenty of opportunities at work, especially if you're not working at church and you're working in the secular world.
Right.
Right,
is there such a thing as a secular world?
Well,
I
we
don't
can
know.
have that debate later. But where it isn't as homogenous of a group of people. You've got all kinds of people from all walks of life and backgrounds, and how you engage with folks, I think, is a big part of how you express and live out your faith.
Mm.
I don't pass out tracts at work, but I've also never made it like a secret either. Like, when conversations come up, what you do on the weekend. Well, I haven't been physically to church in a while because of the pandemic, but you can work things in a very casual way, and then that may lead to conversations. It may not, but really I think it does come down to how you interact, how you show up, how you treat other people. That becomes the best expression of who you are as a believer.
Yeah.
I don't know what.
Yeah, I really resonate with that. I really like that because I don't think that our goal as Christians is to convert people. Our goal as Christians is to be representative of Christ and then shine his light through us. But in other ways, we don't want to make it a secret either. You don't hide it under the bush.
Exactly.
Because otherwise we're shining lights of what and people don't know. So if you are open about the fact that you're a Christian and you reflect Christ in your own behavior at work, then maybe people are curious, or maybe people are interested, or they see why does Dune do something in some certain way?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I've heard years and years ago, and I've told this story before, one of my coworkers who worked at Microsoft at the time had a coworker who like went around telling everybody that he was a Christian and like saying, I'll pray for you, like all those things. And my coworker was their boss, and he was like, you're actually terrible at your job. Like, stop walking around telling people you're a Christian, and like just do your job better.
Yeah.
Like, do good work, and then people will like, it represents Christ.
Right.
Both your like financial job and your job as a Christian.
Yeah,
as well.
totally. Yeah, exactly. Amanda, you kind of tipped on or touched on what I think a lot of people have experienced, like shortages and working more with less. And, they talk about how people who stayed in their job got a 20% wage decrease from those who are getting hired at 20% more. I'm sure you've read some of those things. And so I'm curious what y'all have done in order to like provide yourself some downtime, provide yourself some rest when you're working hard and covering and putting out fires and taking care of shifts that staff are sick, or those sorts of things. Like, how have you rested well or cared for yourself well? I mean, you got a blood pressure cup to make sure you weren't in danger.
Yeah. Well, I think having moments to force yourself to stop, right, and rest. Not just for the benefit of rest, but for the opportunity to kind of like pay attention to what's happening, right? To pay attention to what's happening with your body, with your own health, and I think is where it begins, right? Because I think you can very easily lose sight of yourself, in the crisis, in the fire, in the change. So making sure that there are moments that you can stop. Right, and pay attention and be quiet. Right, I think is the beginning of that. And then rituals, whether it's, the walk with the dog, right? I've got my, my paths in the neighborhood. I can do a 20-minute, 1 mile walk with the dog, and I can squeeze it in between meetings, right? So, that's a ritual, right? The path that I take, the time at which I decide I want to, have coffee with my wife, or just there's things that I intentionally do as a type of rest. But I think it begins with paying attention, just stopping and paying attention.
Yeah, definitely. And being intentional about that rest, and also preparing myself to have a posture of rest, I think is really important as well. I am overly responsive on my cell phone. If people text me or email me, I will always reply in less than 10 minutes. It's really bad, actually. So when I go on vacation, I'm probably still doing that. Or if I'm on my weekend, I'm probably still doing that. But if I have the ability to say to myself, I'm just going to take even 1 hour and I'm going to sit down and I'm going to breathe and I'm going to do the thing that is for me right now in that restful posture, I find that to be very refreshing. I'm very bad at it. I don't do it very often, and I really should do it more often. But yeah, just being willing to carve out that sort of time for rest, I think, is so important. Because I think a lot of people will say, oh, I don't have time to do this, or I don't have time to do that. I'm always so busy. And I don't want to downplay the busyness that people have. But if we were to prioritize our rest at the same level that we were to prioritize everything else, then I think that the time for rest will come.
Yeah. Good.
I don't know. I start the day normally like prayer, meditation, Bible study, and I have to allow, an extra like 45 minutes. And sometimes people will be like, you get up at 4:45? What times do you have to leave for work? And I'm like, I don't have to leave all that early, but I need this extra time because I just need it. It gets me ready. So I feel like that's a rest at the start of the day in a way. And then other than that, being outside for me is really restful, and being in the forest and being by the water. Luckily we live right near Discovery Park, so I can go there with my little dog every day possible. And that's really restful for me, is actually getting out and exercise. And but some friends used to talk a lot about quiet time and and this and that, you need to do this, and I was always like, I just can't. And then one day I was like, God made me this way, so maybe that's fine. Maybe I don't have to just sit still,
right?
Yeah.
I'm curious, what would you say to yourself in the transition, right? Like when things were tough, there was some peace in that, right? And there still was a whole bunch of unknowns of what was going to happen. So when you think back, like, is there something you would have told yourself in the midst of the toughness or in the midst of the unknown that you would share?
I don't know. I guess I'm sort of still in the midst of it, it feels like, because it was, I guess July 7th was my last official day, so not too long ago.
Yeah.
I know that at one point I realized time. Do I want to spend my time kind of recovering, or do I want to spend my time with family and enjoying it?
Part of those changes throughout the hardest times, from maybe December, January through to just maybe a couple months ago, I think that the things that helped the most, so if I were to tell myself these things in the transition, I would tell myself again these things to continue holding on to little constants, things that you can control and do. I've been mentoring junior designers for the last 2-3 years. And there were days where I didn't want to do the sessions, right? I just wanted to cancel them all. But I found that keeping them as a constant that I continued doing was life-giving. It's what when everything was burning around me, I had that 4:00 session, and it was going to be different. than the fire, and it was going to be something that I could kind of like trust and rely on for being positive, being life-giving. The dog walks, the coffees, the whatever. I think I would go back and tell myself, don't think about not doing these things, right? Because they're going to be what carries you through, right? These little things that you can control and can keep as constants in your life while everything else is in turmoil. Keep doing those things.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, for me, it's kind of interesting because all the fires that surround me now are of my own making.
Right.
All the stories that you've heard about how difficult small business is are true, and then some. Staff out sick, staff, customer gets hurt, bills need to get paid. We need to make sure payroll gets paid, and if we have to only enough to pay all the employees, they get paid first.
Right.
You always get paid last, and all those kinds of things. So it's this double-edged sword where on one hand, I would tell my past self that it is so much harder than you ever thought it was going to be. And I would also tell myself that it is so much more beautiful than you could ever imagine it would be at the same time, where I'm just dumbstruck constantly at the beauty of what we've created. I see the space, the physical space. I see the looks on people's faces. I see the relationships that have been forged, and I wouldn't trade it for anything.
Yeah, that's awesome. I know this is just like, you shared with us just a snippet of your guys' story related to work, but so thankful that you did. It is a great encouragement to me. I have like 20 million more questions for all of you. But really, thank you for your time, and thank you for letting us kind of see behind the curtain of your lives the last couple years.
Well, hopefully you found some places within their stories that you resonated with, found encouragement of how God was working through them. Because the truth is, and the reality is that God is working through all of us in our workplaces, in the work that we do. So no matter what season you find yourself in, you're in good company. There are folks here who can identify with that, would want to be supportive of you in that season. So whether it is a little bit more that like fires all around me, or some fires and some awesomeness, you're in good company, and we'd love to be with you in that. But kind of toward that end, because all of our stories are unique, join me as we pray for ourselves and our workplaces. Lord God, I thank you that you have made us to work, and that work is good. And then there's also, Lord, times where work is challenging and changing so rapidly that it's hard to keep up. And so, Lord, I pray that you would speak into where we're at right now. I love that point that Dune made from Psalm 19 about your word is a lamp to our feet, and it is just right in front of our feet. And so, Lord, I pray that you would show us how to be where we are, how to take whatever next step you have for us. And if that's staying at our workplaces, great. Show us, Lord, how to reveal you more and more. And if that's making a transition, Lord, give us courage to make that step. And Lord, I do pray that we would be able to do that in community. I ask that you would give us each resilience and each creativity to be in the spaces that we are. We know that you will do all of these things through us, and we wait with anticipation to see what that will look like. In your name, amen.